Today we're going to talk about Pragmatic Panel, building and deploying complex web apps with Panel. So first, a little bit about me. These are sort of all my official roles professionally at work. I work for Quantsite. But in reality, on a more personal level, these are the things that really define me. I simply love data. I love open source. I have on my Slack ID, whatever, that I feel like I'm a Swiss Army knife. And so a friend of mine sent me a Swiss Army knife with my name on it. And I'm a little excited about it here. Anyways, that's enough about me. So what is Panel? Panel is a dashboarding tool. It allows data analysts and data scientists and whoever to write quick and easy dashboards in Python. So it's part of the Holoviz stack, and it's just a great tool because it allows you to iterate in JupyterLab and it gives you a quick prototyping environment, but then also using that same exact code, you can deploy it as a web app. And so, so this talk is really more about the more complicated side of things, but I imagine that some of you don't know what Panel is, and so we'll talk about the basics really quickly, but you know, slides are boring, so let's not do slides. Let's do some code. So this is real code here. So with Panel, we can have, Panel provides both widgets and also containers like panes that can display anything as almost anything as a dashboard, as a component of your dashboard. And so here, I'm just calling a float slider widget. I'm giving it a start and an end and a name. And I'm telling it that it's servable. So this is the secret sauce for actually deploying from the command line. So this gives me a slider, which is really quick, right? So obviously it's really simple, but you'll see where I'm going. Anyways, so now I can Panel serve that notebook, which was called Panel 101, and we can show it. And then, so now that widget, since we called .servable on it, is now a deployed app. So that's really cool. That was really easy. So now I can iterate inside my notebook. I can deploy it to deploy it to localhost. Yeah, so that's great. And then the other thing we can do is the other nifty thing that we can do is we can apply a template. So we can apply this template here. And so now, if I've gotten that correct, state. Let's see. I'm a little bit nervous. Y'all are making me nervous. So now with that little change, we can get some CSS fanciness to go along with our simple app. So now we get a header, we get a sidebar if I had written that part, but we get a sidebar for free. We get light and dark toggles. We get this busy indicator over here on the side. So it's really easy to build things from the ground up, to iterate quickly, and to get something from nothing very quickly. So I find myself in many situations with clients. Clients say, "Oh, I just want to build this little thing," and I build the little thing, and then they say, "Oh, but can you also, extend it? Can you make it do this too? And can you make it do this?" And so, we end up finding interesting ways to make things a little more complicated. And so, so I guess let's go back to slides here for a second. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about the more complicated side of things. Oh, yeah, I just want to give a shout out to Mark Scove-Madsen's awesome panel website here. So if you're getting into panel and you want to start doing more complicated things, he has a really great website. So definitely check that out. But now we're going to move beyond the basics. So what happens when we want to get things a little more complicated? And so first we'll talk about deploying web apps. So there's a framework with panel that you just saw, the panel serve, that allows us to deploy these web apps, right? The thing about that is that what we just saw deployed those web apps to localhost, right? But we find our clients don't always want us to deploy things to localhost. They want to deploy it to, their supervisors or their team or whatever. And so we built out this framework that allows us to build panel apps and then also to deploy them. And so, so we've built something like this. This is our we call it QAdmin. It's just our internal framework that we use for deploying web apps. We built a few of these and for different clients. And you see, there's a lot of stuff in here. And I'm not a DevOps person. I don't know what most of that stuff does, but it can get to be a little bit of a headache to try to figure out where all the pieces are for deploying the panel app, because I just care about the panel part, right? So a great solution to this is CDS dashboards. So it contains DS dashboards. It's a Jupyter extension, so it's part of. So I guess if you have a Jupyter Hub deployment, then you can apply CDS dashboards, and then dashboarding becomes a whole lot easier. So all of these little bits, and I think this is all of them. I could be wrong because who knows what's in all these files, right? So CDS dashboards basically takes all of these pieces and replaces them with just a lovely little UI for me. So I can go to this extension UI, and all I have to do is give it a name, tell it what users I want to deploy to, and then I can also let's see CDS dashboards also allows for deploying not only with panel but also Streamlit and Voila and a couple of other things, probably Plotly Dash. And then you give it an environment and you tell it where is your dashboard, and you can, I guess I didn't mention this before, but you can deploy panel from both notebooks and from PI files as long as you just tag it with the .servable. So you give it the path to your file, and then you get a nice UI from your Jupyter Hub instance, and you're able to edit, delete, and see what other dashboards are available from other users. It wraps it up all nicely for you. So, like I mentioned before, all of these things are taken care of by CDS dashboards, but what about the rest, right? And so the solution to the rest is, of course, QHub, which is being renamed Nabari. And this is an open source project that we at Quantsite have developed, and it is an opinionated Jupyter Hub deployment. This is just a quick plug. I couldn't help it. But you can go from it uses infrastructure as code and does a lot of the automation for you. So it's also a lot easier to maintain as a not DevOps person. So you can go from no Jupyter Hub to Jupyter Hub in like 30 minutes. It's nice. So not having Jupyter Hub, not an excuse for this, not using CDS dashboards. I'm talking fast. Okay. All right. So panel state is sort of secret sauce I want to talk about for a second. So it's sort of behind the scenes of panel. There's a couple of different parts to it. there are state.session args are what the state of panel and all of the widgets in it. It's the initial state that is sent to the JavaScript backend through the Tornado server. And then you also have state location search, which is the live state. So that's the state that's kept up to date. So as you adjust the slider widget, this is kept in sync between the two. And so all we have to do is do a little bit of setup, because not all the information is passed back and forth every time you move the slider widget. That would be pretty heavy. So in order to set it up, we just need to call state location sync, and then we give it either a widget or a parameter name, and that will say, okay, now we're going to sync this particular widget value to the back end. Now, what can we do with that? How does that work? So more code, right? So we go back to our little example here. So we have the same exact example we had before, right? So we still have our little slider guy, right? But now we're going to call state location sync, and we're going to send it this slider here, right? So if we do that, like this. Now that we have sent our slider values to the back end, now when we move our widget, the value and the throttled value, which are two different parts of this widget, are being sent to the back end. And I'm not entirely sure I can make this bigger. Yep, nope. I can't make the text of the URL bigger. But if you could see that, you would see that now we have value equals 5 and value throttled equals 5. So now not only are we pushing that widget value to the back end, we're also updating that URL, which is good, because I'll tell you why. Oh yeah. Let me one more thing. So you may say, okay, well, what if I have two widgets with a value parameter, or I just want to change this URL? The other thing you can do is you can say, hey, I want to sync the slider and its value. Instead, I want to call it my custom argument, right? And so if we do that, now we change the slider and we see all we get up here is my custom argument, 3.9. And it's hard to see, but you got to trust me on that. Okay, so now if we, let's see. Oh, is that right? Let me think of if I have anything else to talk about. Oh, I did. I want to talk about this here. Okay, so now what can we do with that? We often, let's do this actually. We create these dashboards, and so we have, say, you may have a dashboard that has a bunch of widgets on it, and you're zoomed into a certain area, and you've set your sliders and your drop-down menus to select a certain thing, and then you want to send it to your colleague, and you want them to see the same thing. Mars is skating. That's something. Okay, I'll just pretend to not be distracted by that. And so our clients often want to send their colleagues an exact instance of their dashboard, right? And they want to have everything selected just so, right? Well, we can leverage these URL values, these parameters that are being synced to the URL, to send our colleagues to exactly what they need to see. And so we have, this is Flat Pierre. He's a nice guy. Pierre is a colleague of ours. He lives in France and he's not able to be here. So he's traveling Pierre today. So what I've done here is I've created just a dynamic map, and I have created a range XY stream that is linked to the XY values of our image of Pierre here. And so to turn this into a panel app, all I had to do was call panel.image, pn.panel, and put the image inside of that pane, and then make sure it's servable. And of course, I called sync on this range XY to push that range value back up to the URL. All right, so if we deploy this, let's see. Well, it helps if you don't call it server. Okay, so now we see Flat Pierre, and say I want my colleague, my colleague might need the whole image, but I really just want them to be zoomed into, Pierre's face here. Skating Mars. And so, so when I zoom in, as I zoom in, we see the X range up here and the Y range up here is automatically updating every time I zoom in. And of course, these are tuples, so we get some funky, conversion for the parentheses, but you get the point. So that's really cool. So now we can send our colleagues to the exact state of our dashboard. Really cool. You guys, really cool. So some other clever things we can do with this. Deploying web apps before you know what exactly you're deploying. So there have been many cases where I need to deploy something, but I don't really know exactly what I'm gonna deploy. So you saw me go panel serve and call a file name. Well, sometimes I don't know. I don't know how many pages I'm going to deploy, and I don't know what those pages are. For example, I had a bunch of error messages that were transient. So the error messages come and go, and I don't know how many there's going to be, but I need a page for each. Needed to have a dashboard page for each error message, and so we had to come up with this system of how we could provide an interface which could navigate between the pages, and then also I didn't want to create 500 pages or create a new page for every time a new error message popped up. And so we came up with a good solution for this. This is what I just said. So this also, one of the great things that come out of this is we're able to build a cohesive website. So we can have a bunch of pages, we can link the pages together, and it provides us with a nice, complicated website, not just a simple dashboard anymore, right? And so let's see, I will briefly go through this. So this is what we showed earlier. Like if our example today is going to be planets and moons. So previously what we saw was I can run panel serve planets, and if I have 2 pages, I could run planets.py and moons.py. But then how do I connect between the two if I am not sure how many moon pages, for example, I have? And so let me kind of quickly go through this. Whoops. There we go. So there are a couple of things that are good to do here. Let me back up. So instead of panel serving all of the different pages, we can be explicit about which pages we're gonna serve inside of a file. So it kind of cleans up our CLI, and so this scales better. We get explicit. Obviously, explicit is better than implicit, and it simplifies our command line. And so the other thing that we're going to do here is we're going to use those state parameters that are in our URL. We're going to use those to provide navigation between these pages, right? So inside of moons.py, there we go. Yep. So inside of moons.py, we are, I could show the code for this in a sec. We're calling the session args here to get the planet ID. So if that planet ID is in our URL, then we're going to display a certain dashboard. For example, a detailed information about that planet. If that is not available in our session args, in our URL, right, then we'll just provide a list. Right, so actually, let me jump over, and I think it might make more sense if I run this. So we have inside of app.py, we have panel.serve inside of there, and so I'm just running it as a Python call. All right, so here's our page, right? So if I click on the planets, because so the code for this is looking at that URL, it's looking at panel state, and it's not seeing any explicit planet. So on the fly, it's going to display this page as a list of all the planets. If I click on a planet, it's going to see that this planet ID is available, and it's going to display the information for the planet. So if we want to look at the code for that really quickly, we can see that, so here, if we have the particular moon ID, then we're going to, well, if we don't have the particular moon ID, we're just going to list all the moons. The planet pages look the same. Sorry, I did that backwards. Or if we are on a particular planet particular moon or planet, we're going to display the properties and values. So what's actually happening here is this page and this page are actually the same exact panel app. It's just changing the content of the app based on that state. That's a lot of information. All right. Let me go here. All right, there we go. So, all right, so we talked about deploying apps from Jupyter Hub. We talked about panel state, which is the greatest thing. You guys should play with that. And deploying apps before you really know what you're deploying. Lots of good stuff. I know that was pretty complicated. I hope that made sense. It's hard to talk about complicated things in a short period of time. Special thanks to my colleague Pierre-Olivier from Quansight, and then also Philip Rudiger from Anaconda. Couldn't have done it without him. Super great. And I guess I'll take questions.
All right, we have a few questions in the Slack. If you have more, feel free to add them. We have some time. So Xavier asked, how can you integrate this with Apache or Tomcat web/app servers? Or can you?
Well, you need a framework to do that. And when I showed the big list of all the files, that is essentially what it was doing. It was deploying to a certain web service. a cloud service actually. I think it was DigitalOcean. But then the Jupyter Hub route and deploying with CDS dashboards is definitely a better option, easier option.
Nathan would like to know, how do you manage syncing very large parameters such as a variable containing a whole data set?
I'd probably build that into the back end somehow. Yeah, I guess you mean syncing between pages. I'd probably sync a reference variable, and then the data is all in the same because it's all being served out of the same kernel. So the data is there. You just need a reference variable to pull the big data set. Does that make sense?
Nathan, let us know if that makes sense. Tyler says, very cool. Modern browsers have local storage saving state outside the URL. Does this panel access local storage in the browser?
Yes. Yeah. So wherever it's launched from, it would have local storage. So I guess whatever container you're deploying from, it's going to have access to the local storage there in that state. So if you wanted it to have storage to say S3 or some cloud storage, you could build in credentials and such. But really, it's panel is really just serving a UI interface for wherever you're working from.
Zachary asked, can the URL state also include events like a button click?
Yes. So the buttons, so like a widget button has a parameter called clicks, and you would just be watching the button clicks. So you would just be watching that variable on the button.
Ed says, great talk. Does the cloud deployment tooling include any authentication or authorization capabilities by default?
I believe there is authentication built in. We build our authentication at a higher level, so I've not used that aspect. But Philip would be the best person to ask for that, Philip Rudiger. There he is. Oh, it has OAuth built in. So, yep, OAuth is available.
Thanks for the crowd the assist there. Xavier also asked, how is it different or better than Streamlit?
There's been a lot of discussion about what's best, which dashboarding tool is best, and there's no real answer. There's no right or wrong answer. It's really based on your use case and what your particular not only usage, but like the tools that you have available to you. So I believe there's a good blog post about this. I know we've written a lot of documentation around this, so I could send if you want to, whoever asked that, if you want to get with me, I can send you some things that we've written to kind of compare and contrast. But I believe there's a blog post that we wrote about that.